There we go. Good evening. Hi, I'm Village Administrator Drew Irvin. In the absence of Village President Regis Charlot, who's out of town this evening, in the absence of Catherine Hatch, our Village Clerk, who's also out of town, I get the honor and privilege of calling the July 25th, 2022 Village Board of Trustees meeting to order. And I will call roll. Trustee Ankerman.
Here.
Trustee Briand.
Here.
Trustee Fisher.
Here.
Trustee Marquis.
Here.
Trustee Rappin.
Here.
And Trustee Ryder.
Here.
So at this time, it's common for an individual on the board to nominate the longest-serving trustee, which is Barbara Ankerman, to serve as President Pro Tem. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion approves.
Thank you. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item on this evening's agenda is the GFOA Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting for the FY21 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. And so the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, established the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting in 1945 to encourage and assist state and local governments to go beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles to prepare annual comprehensive financial reports that evidence the spirit of transparency and full disclosure, and then to recognize the individual governments that succeed in achieving that goal. The Village of Lake Bluff was awarded the Certificate of Achievement for the Excellence in Financial Reporting for its fiscal year 2021 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. This is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting. Despite receiving this award numerous times, staff remains committed to continue working on improving the quality of financial documents and maintaining transparency. Staff is appreciative of the Village Board and the Finance Committee's support and guidance in these efforts. And as the chair of the Finance Committee, I want to also just personally thank Bettina for all the hard work that she does. She puts together quite a long list of reports and is available for comments every meeting. So we appreciate all her hard work in preparing all of the items in the annual comprehensive financial report. Okay. Next on the agenda is consideration of the minutes of the July 11th, 2022 Village Board meeting. I understand that Drew has circulated a minor typographical error correction on page 6 of the minutes. Were there any other additional comments or corrections to be made to the July 11th minutes? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Trustee Rappin. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next on our agenda, we have opportunity for any non-agenda items and visitors who wish to discuss with the village president and the Board of Trustees. We have 15 minutes during this time for individuals who'd like to present anything to the board for a matter not listed on tonight's agenda. So each person is asked who would like to address the village board to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. And I see we have a number of visitors in the audience. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Please step forward, state your name.
Hi, my name is Nancy Delvo.
And
Pam Russell, 448 Gurney.
Oh, sorry, two.
maybe we could move that mic a little bit closer so there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. 230 East Sheridan Place.
Okay,
I'm Lee Sacknoff at 629 Mountain.
thank you.
And we are here today to hope for a quieter, cleaner Lake Bluff. Gas-powered leaf blowers are an eco and health disaster. We've been here before, but we think the climate, no pun intended, has changed. And we know the community's ready. We'll explain why. And technology has advanced. There's definitely more electric out there, and many leaf blower companies have electric at this point. And we believe it's on the village's radar at this point. So here are some of the reasons.
Sure. I think some of you may have seen the petitions that we've had a couple posters around the community, and we've gotten almost 300 signatures. This was, and one of the posters was on my lawn, and I've witnessed many people coming by more than enthusiastically, thanking me. We have many people from out of town who come by and say, you can't sign, said, I wish this was happening in our community. So first of all, thank you for having us, and thank you for your involvement with the consortium. It means a lot to us, and a little history on leaf blowers and some of the dangers. The most acute would be the ones that we hear, and that's what probably is the most annoying, but not many people understand the respiratory damage and other health damages that there are. A gas-powered leaf blower emits carbon monoxide, cancer-causing elements, many other contaminants into the air, and it remains there. It remains in your lawn, in your yard, perhaps for a day or for hours. I think to put things in perspective as to how damaging these are, is that 30 minutes of use of a gas-powered leaf blower is equivalent to a Ford gas truck going 3,900 miles. What's the difference? You're sitting in your yard, you're the resident, you're the homeowner, or you've got your operator sitting there. Meanwhile, the gases that are being emitted you're wallowing in these fumes. The truck is on the road 5 miles beyond where they emitted the gas. What is the reason for this problem is that the gas-powered leaf blowers are two-stroke engines. This is a technology that's essentially antique. It's very old. It's not regulated like a typical gas-powered car or truck. Gas-powered trucks and cars from the 50s and 60s are about 100 times more pollutant. Let's put it this way. Cars today, and I'm not talking about electric or hybrids, are 99% cleaner. Gas-powered cars are 99% cleaner than they were in the 50s and 60s. Not so with things like two-stroke engines. Two-stroke engines are the ones that are being used for many of the lawn care gas blowers. So I'm going to go on to health, the hearing and health, because that's the one that comes to mind. These things, of course, we all know when they start up, and this is how I got involved, where I was having a discussion with Pam years ago, and all of a sudden a gas-powered leaf blower started. We couldn't have a conversation, and she got me involved with the Green Mines in Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. But we have other people now involved, and of course we've had this outpouring of people wanting to stop the excessive use of these things. So a gas-powered leaf blower goes between 75 and 90 dB, which is decibels. 75 decibels is going to start damaging your hearing. I'm going to have a couple other statistics here. In 15 minutes at 100 decibels, you're going to start having deterioration of your hearing. Hearing is not reversible. Your hearing loss is not reversible. At 115 dB, in 30 seconds, you're going to start having hearing loss. Well, I bring this up and you say, well, who cares about, 115? These things only emit 90 to 100. An hour and a half ago, before I left for this meeting, the neighbor's yard service had their yards being blown with gas-powered leaf blowers, and that's plural, 2 of them. So this is for one. And I might add, while Lake Bluff ordinances restrict noise levels to a maximum of 60 decibels in residential areas, I'm not sure if you all know this, leaf blowers and landscaping equipment are exempt. There's no restrictions. It's a number of leaf blowers that can be used simultaneously.
Yep.
I'm going to quickly go to the damage to the natural environment. And I know I'm maybe a little amped up here, but obviously I'm sort of passionate about it. But leaf blowers put out about 200 miles per hour of wind. It's often called hurricane force. Actually, a hurricane force, Category 5, which is the highest category of storm, puts out 157 miles per hour of wind. These instruments that are blowing, these gas-powered leaf blowers are putting out 200 miles per hour of wind. Now, what does it do? It blasts insects, the biodiversity out of your yard. It destroys the eggs and fertilize.
And no insects, no birds.
Yeah, when there's no insects, there's no birds. And these insects aren't. I might add, I'm seeing for the first time lightning bugs in my yard. Another neighbor who came by and signed this just moved to Lake Bluff 2 years ago and said, never thought that they would see lightning bugs again. They were environmentally conscious from the get-go, and this is the first year they're starting to see lightning bugs. Essentially, lightning bugs are the canary in the coal mine.
And so,
Clarify that that's because locally they're not using the
Yes.
gas powered leaf.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a very localized and sectional situation.
And then, what can we do? Are we on, what
No,
can we do?
mental,
Oh, yeah.
mental health well-being. So obviously, I don't know if many of you know that at one time, part of the branding of Lake Bluff was an oral tranquility. Thank you very much. Someone remembers. And what is that? I'm not too sure, but it's something about being tranquil. And it's real hard to be tranquil.
Quiet,
It's
quiet.
really hard to be
Yes.
tranquil
Yes.
when this. So, what is a natural quality and a very nice natural setting that we have here in Lake Bluff is one of the things that certainly drew me to this community is the quiet and the peace and hearing the birds. And I'm going to give you a couple anecdotal notes as to when we started to put these posters up and the petition signs up. These are the types of things that came to my attention. First person came up to me, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't enjoy my morning coffee anymore because of the leaf blower starting up.
Yeah, some man came up to me, he's like, I love you, and he doesn't even know me, and it's because he's like, enough. And one more thing, I know we're
No, go
going
ahead.
over.
No, go ahead.
I am originally from Wilmette, and I lived there 30 years, and for 15 plus years, they've had a band in Wilmette and all along the North Shore. It stops in Highland Park, I believe. And it's time, it's time, it's the climate, general, speaking in our world today, and, people are saying this is enough. It's too loud and too polluting, so.
I want to thank you, and I want to go real quickly back to some of the comments I've seen, and I wanted to also tell you how mind-boggling it is to see bicyclists, motorcyclists, runners, dog walkers, walking by, they see the sign, it's like a double take. They come back, they say, where do I sign? And I might add, you've got about 300 names. Those are not necessarily single names or families are signing
And
on.
we started July 1st.
So this is all done within 1 month, 300 people. We have not gone door to door.
No,
We have
we
not started, saying, would you come over here and sign this thing? This is all volunteers and with great enthusiasm. Again, out-of-towners are coming and saying, I wish this was happening in my yard or in my community. And one newcomer to the village said, I love everything about Lake Bluff, except the noise. So, 6.
What can we do?
Yeah, let's get this done.
For starters, the village can impose a supper ban and limit the weekend hours. I know 6 years ago you changed the ordinance and increased the weekend hours.
Yikes.
So, as everybody said, we can't go out. Every time I want to go out, you hear noise. So, we can also educate people to stop using leaf blowers now. As they read the literature, and I'm going to give you a copy of this information sheet, they were like, oh, I didn't really recognize that, because noise is what everybody hears. But the pollutants associated with gas-powered leaf blowers, that was an eye-opener. Limit the number of blowers in yards, again, educating, and it's not just the residents, it's the landscapers. They've got the equipment, they're supposed to look busy, they're using them in the summer, we're not cleaning out the bushes, why? Mulch and rake, for those who still want to.
And we approached this thinking we'd only get 100 signatures at best before this meeting, and we have over 300.
So we got some to share with you at the end of the meeting. Oops.
So,
All right.
all right, so. Okay. Whoop. Well, we want to know who,
You're just trying to get this back open.
Yep,
thank you.
sorry about that.
So they have the technology, it's out there. We all know it now. There's electric, we have an electric lawnmower. leaf blower, everything. You don't have to have the gas. It's probably more expensive at this point. So, should we go on to this?
Speakers.
Okay, so, wait, where are we? No, I know. So we understand there's a regional group that's working in the community as well. Is it moving? It's not moving.
So the new post-pandemic normal, people are working from home, they're hybrid working. All right, we'll go to why wait. Anyway,
Why should we wait?
it's time.
Honestly, this was typed yesterday when there was just a mere 270 signatures. We're up to about 300. We have copies. You guys could see it. Again, some people are writing. As soon as someone starts writing in the margins saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, it's about time.
And communities from Evanston all the way to Highland Park have had this in their ordinances for 15+ years.
Yeah.
So
I'd be happy to supply you with, and I'm sure you know about this, Drew, the list and the spreadsheet of what the ordinances are for the various communities on the North Shore and the northern suburbs. And, you know, some of them are way ahead of us. And frankly, what we're asking for is just not necessarily just like wake up, you know, for the whole community to get on board, or for you guys and sustainability to get on board. But, you know, we can go beyond what many of the other communities might be doing. Some of them are just noise ordinances. I think we should be doing something a little more by restricting the amount used. And there's often something called the ozone season, which is middle of summer. It's the ozone season. You know, that leaves are still on the trees, nothing's falling down. Again, across the street, I was looking at this, and many of the people in the Green Minds organization love sharing videos of people using leaf blowers blowing nothing. Literally going down the sidewalk and looking busy. I think this substantiates the homeowner that those guys are working. But the fact of the matter is they're polluting and annoying a lot of the neighbors. In some cases, when fall comes and we have a lot of leaves on, I completely get it. And in the spring, when there's a spring cleanup, completely get it. But in this middle of the season, and I think we can probably, or it would be great if we could restrict some of the hours so we have a little more peace and the oral tranquility.
Okay. All right. All right. So, yeah, so who would like to work with us?
So how do we get this done?
We want to get it
You know,
done.
This is summarizing. Let's get moving, and I know you're involved in the regional work group. You know, hopefully there's a lot of good best practices coming out of that. But let's not wait. Let's start taking action so next summer we can have this banned
Peaceful
at a
summer.
minimum. And we'd be happy to help, you know,
In any
to
way.
educate in any way.
Well, thank you for the good work that you started, and we'll take that information down. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you
Please
for
Please
hearing
let
us
us
out.
know who we can work with.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And I've got 270 some signatures, and I've got an information sheet here for everybody. There's just one set of signatures, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hold on to those.
Is there anyone else?
Send these down to Drew.
Yes. Is there anyone else in our, in the room who would like to speak on something that is not on this evening's agenda? And is there anyone online?
No one is raising their hand.
Okay. Thank you so much. At this point in time, the village board sets the order of the meeting. Is there a motion to move up any of the items that are currently later on in the agenda? Should we move up
Item 8A,
item 8A?
and then probably item 14.
Do I have a motion to move up, do I need a motion to
You can
move
say
up?
if there's no
Okay, if there's no
without
objection, I'd like to move up item 8A and item 14 to be handled next, and then we'll resume the listed order on the agenda. So I'm not hearing an objection. So the first is the village administrator's report. Drew?
If we could, in your packet was a memorandum. I won't go through all the details of that, but the village has been working with the Lake Bluff Park District and the North Shore Water Reclamation District as they have prepared plans and to install a overflow basin reservoir down at the lakefront as an appurtenance to their existing facilities. And the purpose of this reservoir is to manage catastrophic power failures and to capture sewage so as to prevent it from going in Lake Michigan, and then also to allow them the ability to maintain their system, their infrastructure. They need to divert waste from time to time to maintain their pipes. So it's an operational necessity. So again, they've been working on plans. I think it was December of last year when the last presentation was made to this group. There have been some workshop with the ABR and the PCCBA earlier in the year. But this is where they're at to date, and this is Nick Patera from Teskin Associates, who's a consultant working with the North Shore Water Reclamation District, who would like to show you where they're at.
Great, thank you, Drew. Thanks for having us this evening. With me is Commissioner Tom Swarthout and North Shore Water Reclamation District Steve Waters. We are making progress aiming towards trying to make a good fit for this basin that's going in. It's essentially, just so anyone in the audience might know, it's essentially where the boat yacht club is now, would be excavated, and the the storage basin would be placed subterranean at a great depth and piled. It's basically a concrete chamber with a concrete lid, and then it gets covered with sand. So somebody who comes down tomorrow would say, we don't know it's there. You can't see it. There's some other elements that go along with this. It's not just their ambition to kind of come in, drop the basin in, and walk away. So it starts at the top of the road, and the road itself would be, after the work is done, milled and resurfaced. As we get down further towards the north side of the building, they're planting bed at the north side of the building. This has all been parts of discussion, so I'm just trying to kind of take you on a tour of what we've made progress on since we met last time. But the north side of the, that's called the pump house, the big building on the right, would have a wider planting bed. Right now there's some kind of scrawny-looking trees and some plantings along that side. We've talked about a couple of different options for what could happen at that north side of the building. One would be a mural on the side of the building. I'll show you a picture. The other would be just simply a planting. Also, the experience of coming down the hill before you go too far, whoever's switching, Drew. The drive coming down would have a new guardrail. Right now, there's a metal guardrail. It would get replaced with a wood guardrail. We'll show you a picture of that in a moment. The planting bed on the top left picture would be widened, as I had mentioned. The top right picture is the view that you would be looking south. The east facade, we have two different options. In the distance, you can see an evergreen shrub, and then the generator is kind of visible. The generator doesn't win any prizes today. It's surrounded by a chain link fence in a metal container. So first of all, we have two different ways to approach this. One of the elements of the subterranean basin is a junction box that's basically an overflow, like a sump. It's called a wet well. And we've located the wet well on the east side, about where that big evergreen shrub is, as one option. And then next to it would be two bathrooms on the first option. We can go and look at that. Yep, we can come back to these if we need to. There's the structure. Thanks, Drew. The generator you see on the right. So this is the first option. Those kind of buff yellow, brighter yellow color are the new buildings that aren't there today. So that the projecting building is the wet well. That's that junction box that's functional to capture and to redirect water in an event that we need to use the basin. And then the two bathrooms are adjacent to it. There's an outdoor shower, or two of them, that would be located here. And then we have to locate a trash enclosure at those two gray boxes would be so that we have a place to locate trash indoor recycling. We've also shown a bike rack down at the south end of the generator building. there was comments about this plan. How can we look at this plan and say, can we keep the east facade of the existing building free and clear of the proposed structures, the generator, the yellow two twin bathrooms and the wet well? Can we look at some options for that? So if you scroll down a little further, those were those buildings, and we've looked at what happens as long as we're here. This is the mural idea with the widened planting bed, either before or after this one. Is this you, Drew?
Yes.
Thank you. Just before or after, you can keep going. You can see the wood rail in this picture coming down the hill, and where Doggie's getting walked there, that's still a 24-foot drive road that's allowing big trucks to come down and move sand, or people to pass two directions, but it doesn't need to be as wide. And you also see that we're screening some of the transformers. Sorry, you can't look at them anymore. They're still behind this louvered screen. That louvered screen plays a part. Up at the very top of this pump house building, that's an architectural element. As much as we can say there's architecture on this building, there is. There's columns, there's bays, there's louvers. We're going to use those louvers as the metal trim to try and unify as we go around the corner. So I'll just keep that in mind as we look further. Drew, scroll down a little further. Same building in its basic form. This is what it would look like, absent mural, but just with vertical plantings up against the north elevation as a foreground to the building. The louvers would stay, the transformer screening would stay, the road widening would stay, and the wood wall guardrail would stay. The person walking here is walking on a broom finished concrete like a plaza. The whole idea with this is to integrate both the South Beach and the North Beach on a cool walking surface and not make it look like it's meant for trucks and utility, but make it look like it belongs to people, and to integrate both North and South Beach together. Go ahead, there's more to be seen. These elevations, you're going to have to turn your head. Sorry we did it this way, but this was the first version where the outdoor showers are on the right side or the top of the image. If you just kind of, oh, you're going to try and do that. Great. Nice job. Back up. Well, this was what you saw that got flipped was where the buildings were on the east side. This is now the version that has the east side of the big building, which is the pump house, kind of clean. But how did we do this? We had to spend a lot of time and effort and money to look at how can we push the generator west, and so it basically goes back towards the bluff. But in order to do that, we have to lift it up out of the ground in order to push it back so we don't, in simple terms, jam it into the bluff. We just can't do that. So it's up, and so that louvered screen that you're looking at behind, hey, well, wait a second. Yeah, so we're referring to this as alternative 2.
There.
This is where everything is kind of pushed back. That the top of the image is where the east elevation of the pump house is. The wet well kind of got turned 90 degrees. Hold still for a minute.
Trying to, sorry.
Okay. And the generator is now elevated in order to avoid crashing into the bluff, and we have to then get a little stairway to go up to it. It's elevated up about 7 feet. We still have retained 2 bathrooms. One's an ADA bathroom that's big enough to get in. It could be a family bathroom. The second one is just a simple toilet and sink, still a functional bathroom, but it's just not twin ADA bathrooms. The showers are still back up on the east elevation, but now we have landscape along the east elevation. I think we may be kind of getting towards the end, but look and see what else is left on this, Drew.
I skipped this one.
Okay.
This is the site plan.
Right, this is the overall site with that east elevation cleared out. You can see the north to south beach has the paved plaza. The boat yacht club has kind of still just is a placeholder for the time being. Because we want to move ahead with this project, do it as much as we can off-season. We'd like to get concurrence from the village to proceed with these plans. The yacht club may or may not be done at the same time, but at least the podium and the placement of the yacht club on top of the basin is something that we're cooperative with, but we don't want to end up having, if they can't come forward with a consensus on how their design is working right now, then we would like to move ahead independently of them and then let them come back in as we move forward. I think one other thing I didn't cover, which is the building appearance. There was questions about what can we do to clad the building, what can we do to paint the building, and really the yellow brick of the pump house building is the most kind of prominent color. The dark gray louvers and the metalwork are still kind of the second accent trim. There's a top coping on the metal flashing of the roof. So it's still staying this kind of buff beige color. Paint would happen on the new buildings or on the pump house building or the odor control, which is a south smaller but still large building. The paint would be made to match along with the generator would get painted. It's no longer white. And then the new buildings of bathroom, the new buildings of wet well would be the same brick as the primary pump house building. So we've tried hard with paint and materials to kind of keep it simple, use what's there, and also keep in mind, make it durable. This gets blasted with winter. Anybody who's been down here in the winter knows what happens when we have a northeast wind coming in. And so any kind of secondary, call it treatments, would not be as durable as brick. If we painted it, it would be an ongoing headache. If we clad it, it would just be something that required more maintenance. The brick has been there for a long time, and we'd like to keep it that way and just kind of simplify the shape and the form of the buildings. I don't know, unless you have something, Tom, that we can come back and answer questions.
Thank you again for allowing us to make this presentation. This has been a big effort by a lot of people, not just in this room, but staff of both Lake Bluff and the sanitary district. Our mission, obviously, is to protect Lake Michigan. Over the course of the last 3 days, I think it's pretty obvious that we need to move this forward as quickly as possible. As a former chairman of our Parks Department in Lake Forest, our goal was always just to take this beach out of utilization just for one season. So it's really imperative for us to begin this fall. As you probably know, we were going to have this funded through the private sector. The interest rates have changed that dramatically, so we're going to fund this out of pocket through our own reserves. And I have 4 other trustees who are wondering why we're going to the effort of trying to beautify a building that's really made to protect the beach. And being a lifelong resident of Lake Forest and my wife a former lifelong resident of Lake Bluff, it's pretty imperative for me personally to make this as attractive and be utilized for the village as a gathering place, more of a plaza rather than just the utility building that it serves as today. So we're really thrilled with the outcome, and we're really looking forward to collaboratively work with the village to move this forward, and welcome any of your comments right now.
Well, thank you for that presentation. Did you have anything you needed to say?
I just wanted to clarify. So procedurally, this project still needs to go through the village's recreation, institutional, and open space process, which means a trip to the PCCBA, so the Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Architectural Board of Review, and then ultimately back to this board with those bodies' recommendations for any kind of final details. And not to speak for the North Shore Water Reclamation District, but I think their goal is they want to get this project out on the street and try to get, see what the bidding market is like and see where their numbers come in and see if it still makes sense and if they have the ability to start as early as this fall. So, but they need some guidance from you all and some level of comfort of going to market with this, one of these plans or a combination thereof. But they're looking for some direction in that regard.
So do any of the board members have comments or questions?
I do.
Please.
If your commissioners wonder why you're going to the trouble, you might point them to the decree from 1969, which mandates that you have to go to the trouble. So just in case they have any questions. I really appreciate the second design we've gotten here. I think that shows, maybe for the first time, a willingness and a desire to really look at Lake Bluff's beach as the asset that it is. So bringing everything in line with the eastmost, or the large building, the pump house building, and no further east than that was the goal. It seems that this number 2 meets that goal. I'm interested in everyone else's perspective on that, but that was my number 1 goal. We'll have to talk to the yacht club about what that means for their eastmost elevation, but I think this is the design we were hoping for from the beginning, and perhaps I'm more optimistic and others will see fault with it, but I think this one actually does us justice.
Anyone else?
I agree. I like this one. I like how they shifted the well and the 2 buildings. I have a question about raising the generator. I'm sure you guys have thought through this, but can you access the generator? Like if there's a problem with the generator, it needs to be serviced or something needs to be done, it's kind of tucked right in there, like way back in there. Now it's raised and it's accessible through a stairwell. Is there another way to access it if we need to do work on it? If we need to get some kind of machinery in there?
Yeah. I'll let you go ahead and point it out, Nick.
Right.
Yeah.
What we're doing is putting a louver panel. This is the wet well building.
Okay.
This is the generator. There's a louver panel that's beyond the roof of the wet well that would lift out. There's a staircase that goes up here.
Okay.
That you can have a catwalk that accesses the guts of the generator. But if we really needed to lift the whole thing out, this louver would lift out, and we could then, lift the bridge over the roof of this wet well. The wet well roof is just a concrete roof.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is much improved from the last one we saw, and I like all the greenery, and I like some of the details that you've brought forward.
I think this is really on the right track. It's really nice. I just wanted to confirm, the entire road will be repaved, resurfaced?
It will be an exposed aggregate. So we've had extensive discussions about the kind of aggregate we'd use. We'd like to have it more of a sand mix aggregate, not an exposed pea gravel. There's a lot of examples of that. I think the one that I think is the most representative of what we would like to see that would bring in the sand of both sides of the lakefront is St. Mary's Plaza. When you go up the steps, I don't know if anybody's familiar with going up the steps at St. Mary's. They have a terrific aggregate there, and we think it's user-friendly, so it doesn't feel like a road, and you could entertain there, and you can imagine, having several hundred people there in an evening, and so we don't want it to look like, a parking lot.
Yeah.
And so we think and it works for trucks as well as plows as well.
Yeah. So I'm, so on board with where you're heading. I only have one aesthetic question. That's how little it is. Can you just go to the next slide? In terms of the building, as much as we try and make this building look good, it's still a building down on our beach. Next one, actually. And so, again, really small thing, but I think shielding it as much as possible. Here, you don't have to go sideways, but I think as much as we can put, shield that with landscaping, the better.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what I was gonna bring up is, as a landscaper, I'm skeptical about the landscaping survival rate. So while I see your point, I think the fatality rate here of the plants, I realize this is just maybe for this presentation, is gonna be really high. With winter burn, as you just pointed out, the storms down there are gonna make it incredibly difficult for evergreens to survive there without them being replaced often, particularly boxwood, which is what I see here. So I like the plan. Trustee Ryder's right. This is on the right track. We had talked a lot about how much it was going to encroach onto the beach. But I think you'd be just throwing good money after bad to put all these shrubs in. They're just, especially the ones on the eastern facade. This building is not attractive, but it is what it is. And it wouldn't be improved by a row of evergreens that suffered winter burn that they will never recover from. I'd like to see more beach grass used and things that belong there. That's kind of what's in one of these mock-ups already, and I think that's the aesthetic that Lake Bluff really has been trying to strive for with all of the work that's been done on the bluff. So this, to me, seems way too formal and extremely high maintenance because of the nature of the weather there, not just in the winter, but also year-round. We get tremendous storms. So that would be my biggest concern, would be that. I don't see the point of putting all that in there only to have to replace it later. And my question would be, whose cost would that be to replace it? Because that will happen. So that's my only comment.
I think those are great comments. We've had discussions with the Park District too, in terms of who's gonna maintain the bathrooms, we have recycling issues, 8-yard dumpster versus 2 4-yard dumpsters, who's gonna go down there on a weekly basis, the odor that may cause, who's really creating that odor? I mean, we still are reckoning with that conflict, and we'll get that resolved hopefully soon. So those are all great comments.
Kate, I have a question. Do you have the same concern on the north elevation there, where large trees are replacing the mural, hopefully?
No one likes my mural idea.
A for effort.
Perhaps the same concern with weather damage. It might be
Yeah.
sad to
Yeah,
watch it
well.
disappear.
Yeah, that's my fear,
Yeah.
is the upkeep on that. So you have the same concern on the north side of the building?
I do, and but moreover, judging by what's here, these are large-scale arborvitaes, so then you run into a problem with planting them that close to the building. Unless you used a specific type of juniper, which you might be able to get away with, but nevertheless, you have tremendous wind and there's just a lot of issues right there with putting that. That's why native plants do well everywhere you put them, because they can tolerate that. They've been doing it for thousands of years. So broadleafed evergreens are just a poor choice for this location. And I see hosta in here, which is not a good choice, or native. But yes, I realize painting it black, which was my suggestion, which would make it just disappear, might be more high maintenance, but I think you're just trading high maintenance issues. The mural would be high maintenance because you'd have to touch that up. The plantings will be high maintenance. So I like the grasses and other native plants better. I just think it's a better aesthetic and low maintenance.
I just am really excited about the plaza detail. I want to tip my hat to that because right now it does have an unappealing vibe, and I think it'll encourage more. It'll encourage us to look at it more as a gathering place, a pedestrian gathering place. And you already hit on one of my questions, which was who's maintaining specifically the bathrooms, and how we, if there's a plan to approaching keeping it safe and clean. And I guess that also goes to my next question, which is circling back to the discussions about odor and how does this plan coexist with the concerns of the community about the odor that has been existing?
Yeah, I don't know if I need to have Steve weigh in on this, but we are addressing the odor issue and having, more research done into what we've just replaced, some of the
Right.
the contents inside. So I think that's, a great thing to point out. I do need to, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I have 4 trustees who are wondering why we're doing this. So there's a lot of stuff that they're looking at going, our job is to try to keep pollution out of Lake Michigan. Our role is to pump sewage uphill, and why are we going to this extent? So I'm dealing with you, but then I have to deal with people who, you know, we're all about saving money. Reason I think that the district has been so successful, prudent financially, is because it's been run by PEs who really don't care what things look like. They just want function. And I have trustees who are in Zion and Waukegan and North Chicago and Highland Park who are, why are we doing this in your district? So they're not here, so I can say that, but
But they'll be watching the tape.
I doubt it. But you need to appreciate where, you know, my battle with them the next time we meet, because we're going to spend $10 million, and every dollar we spend on aesthetics is one less dollar we can put into replacing a pump. We just authorized $450,000 to fix a generator in Waukegan that's very old, because a new one will take a year, and it's $1 million. So that's kind of where our mission is most days.
I have one additional concern, and that is with the elevation of that generator. How does that impact sound? I mean, does that mean that now it'll be kind of,
I don't think it had any impact at all. In fact, it was raised so we could push it back. The easy thing to do is just leave it where it is. It's obviously very unsightly, very functional, but very unsightly. I think Steve pointed out to me just last Saturday, we normally on a given day, we generate about 500,000 gallons of water that gets pumped up. I think on Saturday it was like 7 million gallons.
wow.
We never lost power, everything functioned, but we were a hiccup away. North Chicago had the same issues, Lake Forest. We're very, not fortunate, but, you know, there are systems in place, and the reason we're doing this is so if something fails, we protect the lake. And that's why I'm really hoping that we can get this thing over the finish line this year, because 2 examples, Deer Path underpass, it's gonna be completed in a month, right? And the big stormwater system that we're putting in the north end of Western Avenue, I have a building at the north end of Western Avenue, if you were to go there. Every building on the east side of Western Avenue on the north end is flooded 8 feet high. And the trucks that are still there tonight, Crystal Point parking lot, or parking structure flooded. The new Kelmscott development flooded. Because there's 2 months away from completing a major project, and Drew knows all about that. So I don't want the same thing to develop here in a year and a half if we lose this season. Otherwise, we'll have to wait a full year again to start next fall, and I don't want that to occur, and I don't know where I'm gonna be, so.
So, did you have any additional comments, anyone?
I guess I had one last question, Drew. This might be more for you. So once this is all completed, if the Park District wanted to, say, put some benches down there, I mean, I feel like we're gonna have this nice space, and I understand the building behind it is what that building's used for, but I still feel like there's nice space there. Like if you wanted to put a bench, or like certainly maybe over by the showers, you might want to have a bench. Would that be the Park District's responsibility, or the Park District would make that decision, or is this more, would that fall under your purview? I'm not sure.
I would think that's a Park District. We don't have a lot of employees to be sitting down there. But we also have to take in mind, and the village engineers here, there's a lot of trucks that go down there. We need to supplement the sand. You need to bring some of the boats down there. So I'm sure that you can arrange some benches, you know, in strategic places that don't interfere with any of that.
Okay,
That can be looked at as part of the ABR and PCDA
Yeah.
review.
Okay.
I'll make a note of that.
okay, thanks.
It's peculiar because we own the land, right? We, the village.
We do, and I think.
On which this sits, right?
Yes. The practical consideration about heavy equipment coming down there, also plowing, because they maintain that all winter long. They're pushing snow in places to store, snow piles, maybe areas that maybe for gathering as well, but wouldn't that be a great problem to have, is that people want to gather there? Stark difference from today. Right, yeah, so,
Instead of
but
run
we can bring
past.
that up and maybe identify some places for that type of seating, should it become desirable.
So I'm hearing general consensus among the board that we like the direction of this latest iteration. And I see a hand going up in the crowd out there. Would you like to make a comment? Yes. Okay, please, if you'd like to step up and state your name so that the viewing audience can hear.
My name is Tom. My name is Tom Zarzi. I live at 500 Sunrise, directly west of this and a little bit north. I am here to essentially represent the decree from August 22nd, 1969, that caused this building to be built where it is today. In 1969, the Park District was supposed, or I'm sorry, the sanitary district wanted to put this building at the top of the bluff. The village supported it. The neighbors in my area, I wasn't there at the time in '69, decided that the rules or the deed for the park that's south of Sunrise was donated by the Beals sisters. That area, according to the document that I have, would go back to their heirs if anything was built on that park district after it was donated. In this case, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're planning to put the, I'll call it big pit or the holding basin where the yacht club is today. Yeah, underground. But that's part of the deeded gift to the Park District from the Beal sisters. I think if you do that, you violate the covenants of that donation and that it is not legal. I strongly suggest that you put the holding tank not underground, west or south of the pumping station, but west of it in the bluff. And the reason is because, like any septic tank, you're gonna get solids in the bottom and it's gonna be almost impossible to clean out that tank. We also have the problem that the sewer that feeds this station is a brick sewer that runs down Prospect Avenue. It's not in the greatest shape because I think it's almost older than dirt. It's been there at least I think 100 years, because it was what carried the sewerage from Lake Bluff to the lake 100 years ago. So I think it's a wonderful plan in terms of aesthetics. I think it's great that you're gonna make it look much better. I just think that in this particular case, it is not legal for you to build on the Park District land that goes all the way down to the lake. I've talked to a few neighbors, not very many, but everybody that I've talked to is supportive, so I can see us coming back like the neighbors did in '69 and saying, let's protect the Park District land that was donated by the Beals. I very much like the fact that you're fixing it up. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say was the wet basin you're talking about, that's where the smell comes from, right? That's the water that comes from the sewer before the pumps pick it up and pump it out of there? Is that what is the wet basin or whatever you called it, that's gonna be built east of the pumping station?
This plan
Yes.
refers to a wet well.
Yeah, the wet well, that was the word.
Right, it's not producing odor, it's just a junction box that allows water to travel from the pumps to the tank or reverse, it's a junction box.
But it's smelly water, that's a good way to say it, right?
It's sealed, it is absolutely.
Well, I know the existing plant is reasonably sealed, But living nearby, if the wind's correctly and we have the windows open, we know it's there. So I hope it works. The other thing, I wanted to say, one other thing. If you're gonna do all this construction, you're gonna have multiple truckloads of dirt. Rather than trucking it out of there, I think it makes terrific sense to take all the dirt that is going to be relocated to make this holding tank or vessel and make I'll call it a mini Navy pier. Why can't you just put pilings out into the lake, put the dirt there, get rid of all the hundreds of truckloads, and then you can put dirt on top of it and pick the tables, grass, bench, make another nice part of the beach environment. That's enough of my crazy ideas, I guess. But I think it's wonderful that the sanitary district is making these improvements. I've gone to sanitary district meetings more than 10 years ago when this was discussed, and I'm very happy that you're finally making improvements. I just think there's a better way. And I'm not so sure you can legally, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not saying I know what I'm talking about in that area, but I'm reasonably certain that where you're planning to put the holding tank, if it is where the yacht club stuff is now, you can't legally do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Would you like to come up and state your name? Again?
Pam Russell again. Mickey Collins, 217 East Scranton.
We wanted to thank you, the board and NSWRD, for listening, discussing, and coming up with this plan. We think it's a great improvement. I've got 2 comments I'm gonna make quickly, and then Mickey's got some more. But one, if it's possible to move the trash cans to the south and back to the west of the odor control building, then it just gets it further away from people. I don't know if you've got space there or not, but consider that. And the other thing, you're talking about making the wet well and the new structures brick to match the brick. It's really hard to match brick. The stucco, the drive-it, whatever it's called on the odor control building is fine. I think all of our comments were trying to be consistent in color. So consider that as an option rather than trying to match the brick. That's my comment.
Yeah, we owe you a big thank you. We know this was a lot of work. We know you got rather creative to come up with this solution, and it very much answers exactly what we were hoping to see, just keeping everything much further back and kind of protecting the views toward the beach. So thank you, everybody on the Reclamation District side. Drew, thank you, and your staff. I know you worked with them, and the absent Park District too, probably. There's one, I don't know, Drew, if you can bring up the full plan. One thing that I think still is, it probably wasn't even really looked at yet, but the subterranean basin initially was further west, and then subsequent plans showed it kind of coming to the east and rotating. And that would be fine, if it was just the basin, but because the yacht club sits on top of it, now the yacht club in that plan is sticking much further out into the beach than it already does. And it is actually the thing that projects the furthest, so we actually really don't want that coming out any further. So I don't know if you've actually even had a chance to look at that and I don't know why it rotated, and maybe it could go back a little bit west. And then I have one very minor question, and that is I noticed that there's a railing on top of the wet well building, and I'm wondering why there's a guardrail up there. So that's it. Basically, thank you very much.
I can answer.
Please.
The basin hasn't really shifted to a great degree. I think it's just clearer on these plans now that you're seeing subsequent versions. We haven't really jockeyed it around and moved it. It's kind of set at its location. The second comment has to do with the railing. I compliment you, have a sharp eye. Is the idea that it's just here as a placeholder that you could walk up this little staircase and get to the roof of the wet well to service both there's two manholes that would be permanently shut, and it would have to have a railing on top of it. But also, is it a place where it could be an attractive location for a lookout? But we have a gate at the bottom of the stairs. We don't really want to have generally free-for-all open access, but it's an idea that we have as a placeholder for now. It's elevated about the same height as the bathrooms, so that the roof of the wet well only needs to be about 5 feet, but to try and consolidate so it doesn't look like a bunch of stacked blocks, we're making everything at the 8-foot height, and then so on top of that 8 foot could be an observation deck up there. But it's not something that we're advocating tonight, and it's not something we're saying is gonna stop the show or make it or break it. It's just an idea.
Would the engineer from the Reclamation District be able to explain why that basin is cocked and why it is out? The earliest plans that the yacht club overlaid, they did not have it at that angle. It was further west. I just wonder, is there a compelling reason, or could it maybe be moved back and rotated? Are you able to answer?
It's just parallel with the bluff.
Oh, that's the only reason.
Yeah.
So there is a possibility maybe of it straightening out and,
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, there's not much room to work with. We're pushing up against the revetment already. So it's there's much room to move things there. Now, this is very, the yacht club can move anywhere on top of that, but this is all underground.
Underground.
and have you worked with the yacht club yet at all? Because they're coming up with some things that look like they have some columns perhaps, and I mean, I'm just wondering, how that's going to coordinate with you.
We just shared with them what our plans are, and
Yeah.
they're working to.
They're just on their own working on it. Okay, all right, well, thanks.
Would you like to come forward? Yeah.
Why does
And Mr. Zarsi, I'll try to answer your other points too, that you raise.
Yes. Why does the retaining basin, or whatever you want to call it, why is it south of the existing pumping station? Why isn't it north?
that's the district's leased property, goes to the south there. It's just on the property that the district leases from the village.
Yes.
Is that property that the village got from the Beal sisters?
The village has recently completed a survey to verify that all these improvements are on the village's property, not the Park District's property.
Oh, so I'm taken care of. I'm just.
Yes, sir.
I'm just.
Understood.
Understood.
But-
Well, thank you very much for telling me that.
Yes.
I didn't
I told you I was
understand
going to
it.
answer your question, but you raised the same question, so,
Okay.
yeah.
No,
And
that's
so, in
fine.
fact, it goes,
So the whole kit and caboodle is not on Park District property?
correct.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. The appearance is such an improvement over what we have today.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And your point about the spoils, what do we do with the spoils from the dig?
Yeah.
So two things. One is when the district bids the project, they're going to bid it by land and by sea, right? The idea the idea that maybe people aren't as busy doing as many revetment projects, improvements, and hardening of the shoreline from the water now that it's receding, Lake Michigan. So the idea is if they may be able to do all the work from the lake at a comparable price, and that's what we're so as opposed to trucking it up and down the hill, which would involve rebuilding the roadway, Trustee Rappin. So they are going to do the roadway as well.
Yeah.
But that one of the questions, that came up with early on was, well, maybe they could leave the spoils here so they won't have to truck them out.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Just put more piling all
Yeah.
the way around and make it a nicer park area. people were concerned about how narrow that land piece is between the end of the building and the beginning of the lake. Make it wider. Just use the spoils to fill it in, improve the park.
That was one of the alternatives discussed early on, but it was set aside because the consensus was that was not the preferred approach.
Oh, okay.
So, if everybody was as comfortable with you, thank you. Yeah. And I think the other, just so everybody knows that, again, a lot of these finer details can be worked out through the process. They were just looking global. You know, it seems like there's consensus that what you're showing people are comfortable with to move forward with. But the odor issue, the wet well, that one area, we also asked, can that be another planting bed? You know, it's elevated, but they said, no, they need to be able to access that and so forth. So that was just another alternative that we talked about when we saw this version late last week, so.
So I think we have heard a lot of consensus around appreciation for the revised plans. I guess the one aspect that is a little bit kind of leaving details for later, which is the yacht club and what happens beneath the yacht club. Will that come before the board? You know,
Yes.
that's the kind of thing that we want to know. Are we saying yes to 70% of it and then 30% we don't get to see or say until it's done? We just want to be sure.
You certainly get to see, and you most certainly say.
Okay.
So the yacht club is not as far in progression as the NSWRD, and given their timing, didn't want to be held back by them. I know they're also looking for funding alternatives. They were given the same direction. Can you push it further back, even from your current footprint? Can you go back west and elongate things? So they're looking at different alternatives too. But they're just not as far along as NSWRD.
So at this point, do we just give a voice vote of recommendation, or just this discussion being generally positive being enough to have you move forward?
I think we appreciate all the comments, and we certainly get the tenor of the comments. We're excited to move forward and get it, and most of you, with the exception of the mural, we agree. I agree. But we've given it the college try.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, I loved the mural. I'm the only trustee, I think, that loved it. But I thought it was amazing, and I loved it.
You can put it on your house, Joy.
I can. Maybe I'll do that in the garage.
Okay.
So if it would be all right, I have other items to talk about that were not actually listed. One was to talk about what happened with the storm on Saturday, and the other was to make a mention about the villages swapping out, our contractor groups will be swapping out waste and recycling carts, but I can certainly wait and come back to that after the other
Okay, so we'll
item.
have part 2 of the
Part
village
2, to be
administrator's
continued.
report. Got it. Okay, so the other item that we moved ahead.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Feel free to
Thank you.
leave at this point. The other item that was moved forward is item 14, which is a second reading of an ordinance granting a variation from the village's accessory structure setbacks. So, item 14. The summary background states that in December of 2021, village staff were notified by a complainant that a pergola was being constructed without a permit at 305 East Scranton Avenue. An inspection found that a pergola, or 2 connected pergolas, was constructed without a permit approximately in the corner of the lot. This location is within the 5-foot side and rear yard setbacks applicable to accessory structures. Following meetings from staff and the property owners, Joseph and Alexandra Peck, on March 28, 2022, the applicant submitted a request for zoning relief retroactively to authorize the pergola. In their application, the applicant asserts that the pergola is necessary to the applicant for the protection of children and visitors from falling black walnuts that are dropped by a tree locating in a lot abutting theirs from the rear. At its June 15th meeting, the PCZBA conducted a public hearing and unanimously recommended that the village board grant the requested relief with a number of special conditions shown in the attached draft ordinance. In summary, the applicant must, 1, remove the pergola if the applicant moves, 2, remove the pergola if the abutting tree comes down, 3, obtain a building permit for the pergola, 4, anchor the pergola securely to the ground, and 5, comply with any drainage conditions upon the building permit for the pergola. At its June 27th, 2022 meeting, the village board expressed concerns regarding the requested variation and deferred the first reading consideration and requested that the applicant submit revised plans. On July 8th, the applicant provided 3 additional alternatives, which was shown in attachment number 4, for the board's consideration before its July 11th meeting. The new alternative number 3 presented in the revised plans satisfies the minimum rear yard setback of 5 feet and requires a 60% or 3 foot from the side yard setback variation. The village board approved first reading of the ordinance at its July 11th meeting with amendments shown in red line. And then the staff continued to work with the petitioner to provide images for the village board's consideration of the proposed seasonal netting extending between the pergolas and the fence. And so we have the petitioner here this evening.
Yes, Alex Peck.
Thank you. And do you have anything additional to say regarding the application?
Yes, so when I spoke with Drew at the end of last week, we had discussed moving the pergolas further to the garage so that there was less setback requirement on the left fence line. And that's roughly about an 8-inch movement to the right side of our property, which would require roughly a 2 feet setback requirement from the left fence neighboring, and complying with the 5-foot movement of the pergolas forward to comply with the setback with the rear neighbor. So we had provided some images of this overhead protection that would be in place when the tree drops its walnuts. I have a bag of walnuts as it's currently blowing them off when there's winds or the storm. And so that would be up roughly from July until I think we listed December. And then removed during the winter and spring and then placed back up. Securing them from the top of the pergolas via a Velcro strip, something that's easily removable, and then anchored below the fence line with, again, something that is removable like Velcro to a structure that is allowing Velcroing so it can go, go at a diagonal.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from any trustees regarding the applicant's application for a
I
variance?
just wanted to clarify on the netting. The purpose of the netting, right, you have the pergolas, right? And you've got walnuts coming down on the pergolas, but those are protected.
Correct.
And then you have a couple of slivers around the sides that are going to be gravel and other such things that likely your kids aren't going to be playing in.
Correct. So we're moving the pergolas forward 5 feet, but that area is still going to be exposed. So the netting is there purely as a protective measure because we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So telling them somewhere is off limits, it's not 100% guaranteeable. So providing this overhead structure is the goal of that, so that we don't have to have restricted areas in our backyard. They run around the garage, they run around our entire backyard. So although it's a small area, we thought it was necessary for that overhead safety protection, hence why the netting was proposed.
The other question I had was, it alluded to the fact that neighbors will not be able to see the netting, but I assume they can see the top of the pergolas.
So yes, so they would be able to see the netting, but they would not be able to see where it was anchored to because it will be anchored below the fence line.
I don't know if this is a question for you, Drew, to clarify for me, but is the netting, do the PECs even require approval for the netting? Is that in the same concept of a structure?
So it's not a structure.
Right.
But I think that the direction was to have that as part of this approval.
Right.
And it's something that our code is not crystal clear in addressing. But it's a netting would not require a permit per se, but given the relief associated with this petition, we thought it best to manage it through the petition. And the image that was provided, I think everybody sees, it's difficult to see how transparent it is or opaque it is. I tend to liken it to a screen on a window. Is that fair to say that's how transparent it is?
Yes.
Okay.
So the issue before us really still is not the netting at all, if that's not something that you would have had to come and ask for a variance for. It's really the location of the structures, and they're being moved 5 feet forward, which is what we had discussed.
In compliance with the code.
And so it's that, in that sense, it's in compliance. Is there anything else that
The eastern side yard setback is not.
is not? And that's.
It would still require a
They've improved
2-foot setback.
But there's, yeah.
Right, and that's
It
still.
requires a 2-foot variance or a 2-foot setback instead of a 5-foot setback?
My understanding, the minimum setback by code is 5. They're looking to have the structures 3 feet into that, so it'd be a 2-foot
Correct.
space
Right.
remaining.
And the left side neighbors have written a letter of support, and they also are in support of the 2 feet request.
But I notice there are some neighbors that aren't. So my original question was, to your husband, is still one I still have, which is why the structures are perpendicular to the garage as opposed to parallel. That would give you so much more space, and then you wouldn't have any of these issues.
Right, that's the,
Non-compliance.
that's the surface area of where the tree drops the walnuts. So they don't drop parallel to the garage, they drop perpendicular to the garage. So the location of where they were placed was deemed solely by where this tree is dropping its walnuts.
Right.
And the neighbors that have objected the location of the pergolas, with moving them forward 5 feet, it would no longer be an issue with the opposing neighbors.
Right. So then it just comes down to a question of whether we follow the ordinance that's written, or, and this was the sticking point that I had before, what's the purpose of having them if you don't follow them? That's always going to be my issue, is I don't get what the point is of writing them in the first place if you're always going to make exceptions. So I hear you, but at the same time, I feel like there was a way to do this that would have been compliant, and that's my problem with it, is you could have complied and didn't.
If there are no other questions from the board, oh, we do have one more question from the board.
I guess looking at the netting, there's an aesthetic quality there that I think is kind of lacking. And I guess if I was the neighbor looking back at the pergola and the netting, that wouldn't be something aesthetically I would love to look at in my backyard. And I know that's not like we just said, the netting, there's no restriction on how that works. But I feel like there's a little slim piece back there of 5 feet. Like, I'd rather see you guys put some shrubbery or some nice, like, landscaping back there, and that would encourage your children not to go back there. And I think you could solve the problem, and it would aesthetically look a lot nicer in your yard and also for the people looking at it. So that's just my feeling on it. You can, if you.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, there are a lot of aesthetic choices, you know, throughout the neighborhood, so it's not a netting that needs any sort of approval, and,
I guess it's just, for me, a consideration of your neighbors around you. You're in tight quarters on the east side. So that's,
And
you know, what I would prefer.
I will say, we thought we were making our modern pergola aesthetically pleasing by placing those instead of doing something like a netting, but that has since proved a problem. So now we're kind of back to what is aesthetically pleasing to different people, so it's.
Thank you. I see there's a member of the audience who had raised their hand. Did you like to say something? If you'd like to say something, please come to the podium so that the viewers at home can hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for recognizing me. I'm John Smith. I live at 306 East Center with my wife and family. We're the neighbors that own the walnut tree in question. And there was questions circulating that I thought might be addressed to us, so I wanted to just simply offer that we're actually here and you're welcome to ask us any questions you'd like.
Anybody?
How do you feel about the netting, I guess is the question. You're gonna be looking at it, right? You guys will be looking at it?
So I'm not supportive of the netting idea. We're not supportive of the netting idea. I would note, this morning I took my dog for a walk, and we walked all the way around our block, which is Scranton up one side, Glen to Gurney, and Center back the other. I count 22 houses and 8 black walnut trees. either in or adjacent to that space. 10 of the 22 yards on our block are overhung by a black walnut tree, a mature black walnut tree, 60 feet tall at least. I'm guessing most of those trees are 80 or 100 years old. So the entire variance request was really predicated on this idea that there was some special circumstance, some sort of like urgent and clear and present danger that was presented by the tree. And I mean, you've seen the meeting. I don't need to rehash my comments at the zoning board. You've heard what we had to say, but I fundamentally think it's not a clear and present danger. I live under it too, and I don't see why we're even having this conversation. But I certainly am not supportive, my wife and I are not supportive of stretching a net across the fence, the back fire. It's gonna catch all manner of debris, and even if the mesh itself is invisible, the branches and the birds and cats and whatever that, that tread upon it are just
Understood.
all going to be there.
Understood, and I appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else from the board who would like to address the rear neighbor?
How did you feel about it's not a pergola, so how did you feel about the structure when it was built? I'm just curious, you must,
Well, I was really surprised when it was built, particularly because the stated objective, as it was described to me, was to keep the walnuts off the patio because they stain, and they do stain. And if you don't want them to stay in your patio, you have to pick them up. It's a yard maintenance thing that you have to do in the fall, and it's annoying, and you have to do it every day. But we do, and I think everybody who lives under one of those trees does.
is it readily, it appears to be readily visible from your house?
The pergolas are, as they sit now, they're 20-something feet from my patio, my back patio, because we're pretty deep on our lot. We're set back a little further than most of the houses on Center. We're right next door to the church.
Yes.
The white house that got
Yes.
painted gray over the last, it seems like it took a month,
Yes.
because 2 of our crew quit the 3rd day of the job, so.
I appreciate your point, though. Black walnuts are ubiquitous in this area. They're native to Illinois, and many of us, hundreds of us probably here in town have lived with them, so it is not a unique condition.
Yeah,
And it is not a hardship.
Yeah, and if I had a thought for the board, it's just that I don't think the netting's a step forward. I think that's a step backwards. The status quo is better, quite frankly.
Any further questions?
I don't have a question for
John?
John. I kind of want to, and John, maybe I should hold it in case someone does have another question for John.
I don't have a question for John. I do have a comment, but I want to hear from you first.
Well,
If you're-
yeah.
if you're
You may
done with
have
me.
a seat. Thank you.
I guess where I'm at now is if the PECs are able to move 5 feet to comply and then supplement with nets, why are we not moving 5 feet in the other direction and supplementing with nets? So that it's in full compliance.
The garage is in the way.
The garage is obstructing, moving them 5 feet to the right, away from the fence line.
So I guess what I should clarify, I mean making the pergola smaller.
Well, they're prefabricated they weren't constructed custom, so they're prefabricated, they can't be modified to make them smaller. And that's again, the entire surface area of where this tree is problematic. So the size of them and the size of their surface area coverage is deemed purely by the surface area that this tree drops debris and walnuts in our yard.
But there are 2, could you eliminate one of them and then?
But then it's a netting on the other side for overhead protection on the other side as well. So it's, when you eliminate one, then you create another problem of trying to find a solution for that overhead protection on the left side of the property. But we would like to potentially suggest an alternative of having some trees, some shrubbery, but requesting less, not moving them forward 5 feet, but potentially 3 feet, and having landscaping trees instead of a netting, if that is obstructive and cumbersome, not aesthetically pleasing to our posterior neighbors.
Well, I just wanted to, my comment was with regard to having a prefabricated structure. I understand that if it's prefab, the dimensions are fixed, but that could also be, it is alterable, just like a building is alterable, a structure can be altered. And if the process had been gone through and the neighbor had said no, then you would have had to say, you know, is this a hardship? And perhaps the hardship isn't that I have to have a smaller structure, it's that I have to make a custom structure out of a standard structure. And so, although I understand it's installed, it's purchased, it's prefab, it is alterable. I mean, it would take effort and it would take expense, and
They're made out of aluminum, so I don't think the existing structure is not alterable as is. It would have to be removed entirely. It's not, like I said, fabricated out of wood, so.
I think that's the problem that you have, is that the structures violate the ordinance and wouldn't have been approved in the first place. So the real solution is that they come out and that a compliant structure or structures is installed. That's the only, I mean, if we're talking about following the ordinances, and that's our job, then the structures would be removed, new ones would be put in, and you'd be in full compliance with the landscaping and then potentially even with netting if you felt that that was like a third barrier to your children. But I really think that's the only workaround that would be in compliance with the ordinance.
But
which-
why is our aesthetic choices a problem for?
I'm not worried
board?
too much about the netting. That doesn't bother me.
No, I'm
so-
saying the aesthetic choices of the modern pergolas that we selected. That's purely down to an aesthetic choice of what the material was used.
Oh, no, I was thinking purely about the size. You had
Oh, the
mentioned that-
size. Oh,
Yeah, only the size, not the aesthetic.
Oh, okay.
No, I would not, no.
We don't
that's-
care about the
yeah,
aesthetic.
The aesthetic is yours to choose. I was simply suggesting that because the structures are not alterable, because they are precast aluminum, that the only way to come into full compliance is regrettably to remove them. They wouldn't have been rejected because they're aesthetic, they would have been rejected because they're too big. And so Trustee Enkerman is correct, is that you would have been told had you gone through the process, this doesn't work, you're gonna have to pick something else. You would have proposed something. If you were building a garden shed, whatever, it doesn't matter the structure, it still has to comply with the ordinance, and this doesn't.
Right, and-
That's where I'm coming down.
Right,
It just
and they will comply if they are moved 5 feet forward with the rear fence line, and it would be 2 feet on the left. I know I'm repeating myself, but if you drive up and down the streets of Center, Scranton, and North, there are many structures that do not fit the variance. So I understand that we are kind of presenting to you for this variance request, but from how I'm standing, if you're going to require a variance setback, then it needs to be across the board. So there are many structures that are visible from the street line that are not being enforced. So that's kind of where we're standing, is we're gonna comply with the rear setback and requesting the 2 feet on the left, which is not something that is unique to us in this neighborhood.
I do understand that each individual variance application is evaluated on an individual basis, and it's difficult to look at the history of Lake Bluff and each and individual, home to say, well, why were they granted a variation, or why, and, we can't answer that. But each case is presented to often a different body, a different board, and so what we can evaluate is what is before us now.
Right, and from the start of this, we've tried to find a solution, and so from all of the suggestions and, the only request that we are asking is a 2 feet setback. We are bringing them forward, we are moving them, we're modifying, again, which I understand we have to because we are in violation, but when you look at where we started to where we are now, the only thing we are requesting, which I know is a large request, but is 2 feet. So, yeah.
Is it 2 feet or is it 3 feet?
3 feet.
It's 2 when we've moved it closer to the garage, which we are doing.
So you'll have
A
3
2-foot variance.
So it will be a 3 feet separation from the pergola to the left neighboring fence.
So it would be a 40% variation.
Yeah, not a 60%.
Right.
And again, that's the furthest we can move it before it hits the gutters. The gutters jut out, obviously, from the garage.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
And what are our options here? Like, do we vote on this? Can we send this back to the PCZB? I mean, what are our options, Drew? I'm just curious.
You could remand it back to the PCZBA, yes, that's an alternative. There was the ordinance that's in the packet is based off the motion that was approved at the last meeting. You could send it back for more study to the PCZBA and the ABR if you'd like. That'd be a little irregular, but that could be done. You can amend what's been, there's actually no motion on the floor at this moment. So somebody could present a motion that's different than what was originally approved for first reading, but know that on second reading requires 4 affirmative votes of the Board of Trustees for approval. So a little bit higher bar than simple majority that first reading requires. So something to be aware of.
Can I make an amendment to the motion?
There is no motion right
There's no motion, so you can't.
Well, but the
From what was
previous,
previously approved.
to what was previously approved.
Yeah, that would be a motion to approve on second reading with the following changes to the ordinance.
Before you do, I thought I heard a glimmer of a solution here somewhere.
But the 3,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like, no netting, but some plantings and maybe something not quite as close as it currently is, but maybe 3 feet on both sides, 3 feet from both sides with plantings. I thought I heard a glimmer of a possible thing that everybody would be happy with.
I don't know why we would, if,
I'm just suggesting we might want to send it back. If there's some hope that we have a solution here that the neighbors,
And let the PCZBA.
and let the PCZBA.
I hear what you're saying, Susan.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we're being thoughtful about not just kicking the can.
Yeah, I get it, I get it.
Particularly because there is something on the table right now that partially, on one side is fully compliant.
Yes, right, I understand.
So,
and also I've been informed that if we do kick it back, then it has to go through the full public hearing. It's not just, one meeting and it
Okay.
whoop, starts all over again. And we have somebody in the audience again who would like to speak, the neighbor to the rear. Is it possible that we could just have you come up and state what you'd like to state?
My wife and I just wanted to comment on Alex's proposal. If they were prepared to go 3 feet and use plantings instead of a net, we'd be supportive of that.
Thank you.
Oh,
We'd remove our objection.
And just so I'm clear, there's 2 comments, or if I may.
Please.
There's 2 comments that have been noted virtually that I'll just read. One is, why is he so concerned about looking into their yard? This is by Greg. Greg also raised a question. If you require full compliance and the structure is removed, the tree will be trimmed and probably not survive. That works as well. Or if you require the structure to be removed, all structures that haven't been approved need to be removed. And those are the only 2 comments.
What was that last comment?
Greg?
who's Greg?
If you require full compliance and the structure is removed, the tree will be trimmed and probably not survive. That works as well. Or if you require the structure to be removed, all structures that haven't been approved need to be removed.
I think that final comment addresses a perceived problem of other structures not obtaining approval. And, we're not here to address that today. If somebody believes that there has been a structure that is improperly located or not permitted, there's a process to, bring that forward. But we're dealing with what's in front of us today, not with what is every other person doing. And so that should be handled. If somebody feels that there are structures that have not been approved and are placed within setbacks or unsafe in some fashion, there's a process for that, but that's not what we're doing here today.
Not to mention the fact some of those structures could be decades old and have been put in place when no such ordinance existed. So that's a specious argument, but it's nevertheless, that kind of arguing is
Can I ask Alex one more question?
ridiculous.
Mrs. Peck.
You can call me Alex.
All right, thanks, Alex. Alex, the pergolas are up primarily for the safety of the kids, right?
Correct.
Is there a point in which you feel that that safety is diminished with age?
Correct. One of the suggestions that was presented at the last meeting, I believe, there have been quite a few at this point, was removal of them when our youngest is 5. So in 5 years, I'm due in September, so that would be roughly 2020, what? There we go.
Yeah.
Pregnancy brain.
Right.
So that was one of the suggestions. But we are willing to accept the no netting if they are moved 3 feet from the posterior fence line as a condition of variance with just trees and shrubbery between the existing structure and the fence line as well.
So could we make a motion for that, Drew? Can we do?
Amendments to the motion.
Right, amendment? And-
Yep.
Well, we haven't made the motion, a motion yet,
Previous
right?
motion from last week.
Oh, okay.
From last.
And then,
There's no motion.
No, I'm saying,
No.
you'd be
New
making a
motion.
clean motion.
Clean
A clean
New
motion.
start.
Okay.
and then.
Motion to vote or to approve with an amendment.
On second reading.
1 second.
And so to Kate's valid point, I just want to point out that had that been brought to us, with the neighbors agreeing, everybody being on the same page, I think I would have approved that. So I am comfortable making a motion consistent with what's been proposed here.
I am too.
I'd like to add some conditions to it,
And
though.
you've got conditions, okay.
The conditions are the one that Alex just offered up.
Yes.
Of the youngest child being 5, of the tree no longer existing, or of the Pecks selling their house. Those 3 items.
I'd like to add those back in too.
Okay, I'm content with that motion, that there be a 3-foot setback on both sides. That'd be permissible. We allow the 40% variance on both sides. That the understanding is that there will be shrubs and other protective measures as part of that. And that we will have the conditions that when the youngest child of the Pecks turns 5, or the Pecks sell the property, they will come down or be brought into compliance.
Well, if the tree
If
comes
the
down
tree
with that.
Or
comes
the
down,
tree's
or if the
gone.
Pecks sell.
We're gonna hope the tree survives.
She could have 10 more kids.
Is that clear enough motion?
Yeah.
I have to say, I think that the age factor is almost unenforceable because
That's just
if the Pecks choose to have more children,
I know.
you know what I'm saying?
I know, it makes it,
I think the point is,
who's going to keep track of that? I mean, that's weird.
So maybe we alter, well, we just made a motion, didn't we? No. we
There's
didn't
still no
second it.
motion.
So maybe we alter that so that it's just if they sell their home or if the tree comes down. Is that how do we
I
feel
can live
about
with that, absolutely.
okay, that's the motion.
I like the language that was included in the recommendations by the PCZBA. I don't.
Let's
have
pull
That
it
had
back.
the age thing in there, though,
There
didn't
were,
it? That
there
had
were
the age
5
thing
in the
there.
original. It said, 1, remove the pergola if the applicant moves. 2, remove the pergola if the abutting tree comes down. 3, obtain a building permit. 4, anchor the pergola securely. And 5, comply with any drainage conditions. So there was no age restriction.
And I just think that
So,
That makes sense to me. Those restrictions sound perfect to me.
Alex? How are you with this motion?
Yes. As long as there's no 5-year requirement?
Yeah.
Yes.
A 5-year requirement.
Smith?
They can have as many kids as they want. Assuming we have the power to grant that.
I understand that we have one more comment online that we'd like to share.
Taylor Boardman comment. The primary concern was making sure their children were safe when playing outside, and it's upsetting to see how quickly and easily that has been brushed off. That's the
I
comment.
don't think anyone has brushed that off.
I don't either.
I think that's why this has taken as long as it has, because we understand their concern.
So, last question from staff's perspective. It sounds like there's a clear understanding about the conditions. Would the board like to see that written in a clean form at the next meeting, which will be a month from now, And/or would you like to see a landscape plan?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Can I just ask why? Right, 3 feet, the conditions, what more do we need?
I also will be 36 weeks pregnant, so I'm not sure we will be able to represent ourselves. But
There's always Zoom.
Expert counsel.
I don't need to see a landscaping plan, but I'm sure everybody has their own opinion on that.
I wouldn't mind seeing one. I mean, I think if we're taking it this seriously and we're trying to balance making accommodations and variations while also balancing the interests of the neighbors and why are we doing this, I think let's follow it through.
And if they're in compliance, like we're in agreement with the proposed plan, does it need to come back?
It's only whether we're going to vote on it or not, I guess,
Right,
tonight.
it's just that ordinarily, as you all know, you usually have the final ordinance language
Written
on
out.
second reading. So it's just a matter of whether you want to give us direction and draft it without seeing it as you finally adopt it, or whether you want us to take what we've discussed about, amend it, and then bring it back in a month. Presuming we do exactly what you say, that vote should be predetermined.
I think we
but-
should, actually, I'm going to change my mind. I think we should see the final.
Yeah.
I think we should see the final
There's
thing
no
before we
hardship to anyone. I mean,
vote on it.
they're not,
Exists, all right.
right. What's the hardship of doing it the right way?
Well, that's true,
And-
you have yours as is until that point, right?
Right, and if you are unable to attend and the nature of what's being presented is satisfactory, I don't think that there's nothing.
It'll be
I
a
also
short
think
meeting.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said it was just going to be, it'll be a short meeting, unlike the others.
Well, and I also think, I mean, we can share the draft ordinance with
In
you
advance.
and councils to make sure there are no issues, at least on that score.
And I guess in terms of the landscaping, I mean, at that point in time, if there is somebody who does object to the landscaping, that would be the opportunity to say that there's,
Do people get to object to the landscaping?
well, I
don't think so.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what it is we're trying to accomplish.
I was going to ask just to clarify specifically what you're wanting from those plans, specific tree types, shrubbery. I mean,
Do you think you could put in there anyway? I can tell you what you could put in there.
which I would gladly take those suggestions. So,
You're
I
not
mean,
going to be able to fit much in there besides skyrocket junipers. So I
Wonderful.
would go buy about 20 of them because that's all you're going to be able to put in there. So my reason for wanting this final is different because we are, you are, I'm not, saying you want to allow this and it's something that wouldn't, so I think you're right, we have to see it through. But yeah, in terms of landscaping, your options are incredibly finite. So if you truly want to create a screen that your children won't be able to get through, most kids come in contact with juniper once, and then that's it.
Can I ask Mr. Friedman, we're still going to have 3 readings of this, right? So,
No, you've already done one.
okay, so this
So
would be the second, even if it was amended?
Yeah, all we'd be doing is coming back at the next meeting with a revised ordinance for you to adopt on second reading, done.
And then it would be done at the next one?
Correct.
We're not restarting the clock?
No, correct.
Okay.
And presumably, we wouldn't have to have a lot of conversation because we've already had it.
We could put it on a
But don't we
consent.
need to vote on second reading?
And as to the
Right.
landscape, I mean, if you don't want to have a landscape plan to approve it, you can, just delegate that authority to the village administrator to approve.
Awesome.
I was going to suggest possibly just agreeing to whatever trustee, is it Briand, recommendations are, since she's.
That'll be the village administrator. She doesn't have authority to do that.
So
I don't have
Well, her
authority.
suggestions, she is quite knowledgeable in the area, so.
really smart, Alex.
Just agreeing to
Okay.
what shrubbery plant recommendations she has to avoid furthering this plan.
We're not furthering anything, because this is the second reading, it either gets approved or it doesn't. And then we come back for the third one, and we're just asking to have a landscape.
But we don't have to vote tonight.
Yeah.
You don't need. 'cause
We're not
you-
voting, we're
you're-
because
You've given
they-
us direction on how you want this ordinance to be amended, which we will do and come back and you will
For final
vote on
Then we
it,
see the
final approval at the
final
next meeting.
ordinance. We see
You'll-
the
2
final
readings, not 3.
So,
Because it's amended, it's not technically a second reading, is that right,
Again.
Peter?
Correct. Are you, Steve?
No, I'm good. I feel like it's not that complicated
Oh,
to
well.
do this now, but that's my opinion.
Right, but I believe that given the nature of what we're doing, because of how this process began and the reason we're here in the first place, and please don't take this the wrong way, but the whole thing is violative of the ordinance, so we have to do it this way. It's not a good look to do it any differently.
Okay.
Then that generates questions that are not too different from, well, hey, there are a lot of other structures out there that aren't compliant. So let's not go down this path. I know that
Okay.
36 weeks is not comfortable, but if you're not here, he can be here. And, it's like
agree with
that,
that
this
wording?
is just the right way to do it. And I'm sure you can appreciate where we're coming from. I think we
I
need to do
feel
it
really
that way.
pleased that we found something we can live with. So I think what the ordinance is going to say is a 3-foot setback on both of the two sides. 3-foot setback. And the conditions that the PCZBA proposed originally.
Right.
And then,
And then shrubbery along the.
No netting shrubbery to be approved by
Yeah.
the village administrator.
Pretty straightforward.
The PTZBA suggested multiple conditions, but my understanding was it was removal of the tree and selling of the home, those two conditions.
Those are still going to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus the other about getting a permit, making sure
Oh, okay.
all that's there.
Yeah, the building permit.
Okay, so we have a motion. Are we voting on the motion now, or
I
we're
don't care
just
if it was a
deferring it?
motion.
There was no
Okay,
motion.
Still no motion.
So you've directed staff accordingly,
To,
and you'll see that at the next board meeting, which will be August 22nd, I believe.
So we can conclude this discussion, is the point.
with relative certainty that we have a resolution for these folks
I
to
think
go
we're there.
forward. That's, I'm sure, what everybody would like.
So staff has direction, legal counsel has counseled us, and
And we'll come back.
all the
on-
parties in the room who live right around this are seemingly nodding their heads. So with that being said, we are done discussing item number 14.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
And thank you for your input, everybody. Okay, let's resume
Part two?
the agenda. Do you want to go to part 2 of item 8A, which is the village administrator's report?
Please. Jeff. So, first thing, the easy part is, so as part of our recent agreement with Groot for residential waste and recycling, Groot is going to be starting this week replacing household waste, also called landfill waste, and recycling carts this week. And so they're going to be driving around dropping off new carts, and then residents will take those. And so there'll be a period of a couple weeks where people will have multiple carts to deal with. That's just so that there's always a cart available for them to utilize in place of the street, the curb. So, that's starting. The old carts, I'm sorry, the new carts are going to start being dropped off this week, and then starting Monday, August 1st, residents will be asked to place old carts out on the curb, and then they'll get collected. So we're pushing that information out in every possible way. So if you're asked about it, direct people to the village's website or staff. They're aware of how to answer any questions related to that. I did have Jeff put together a brief synopsis, a debriefing of what happened this weekend with regards to the storm event. I'll just turn it over to Jeff.
Can I just ask one
Yeah.
quick question about
Yeah.
Groot?
Yeah.
Because that first week of August tends to be a really popular vacation week for a lot of people.
Yep.
If you accidentally don't put your carts up, will
If
they
they'll-
come around again at some
Yes,
point?
they're going to take them until they're removed, till all of them are removed.
Got
Yep.
Right. So as we all slept Friday night and Saturday morning, there was a storm that hit much harder, I think, than anybody thought. And I'm sure if there was any idea how much rain we were going to get, it would have caused more coverage. I think this should do it the old-fashioned way. I'm sorry. Sleep on me? There we go. Yep, can you arrow button? All right, we're good. Okay, so our viaduct flooded again. It's been 5 years since it flooded like this. Essentially, it's never flooded like this, quite
Some
like
pictures.
like that. If you look at, this is something Lake County Stormwater Management Commission put together of the rain gauges that they use in Lake County. The only 6s you see are Lake Bluff and Lake Forest. The only 5 you see is out by Libertyville. Everything else is in the 4s or under. Actually, there's a 5 up in Gurnee, but kind of gives you the magnitude. We are more than an inch more than any other rain gauge in Lake County. So the storm clearly parked over Lake Bluff and just kept raining on us. So that was really, it's very unfortunate that happened. It just goes to show you how fickle some of these things could be. We just very narrow band that just kind of sat on top of us. So as people are sick of hearing, we had a 100-year storm. That's something that people say, yeah, this happens all the time. If you look at the graph on the lower left, you can see those are, storms that exceed the 2 inches in a 5-year period. So you look at the progression going back to the turn of the 1900 to 2014. Clearly, that's been trending up for a very long time. Because of this change in this how many larger storms we've had, the Illinois State Water Survey produced Bulletin 75, a very exciting name, in 2019, which essentially just changed the definition of a 100-year storm. And our area went up by over an inch. So past storms that we called the 100-year storm don't meet that criteria anymore. So we go back through some storms from the past. Actually, there's one slide in between. Our standards is that our storm sewer system keeps the streets dry in a 10-year storm and houses in a 100-year storm. These are the intensity, duration, frequency curves, IDF. This is where 100-year storm comes from. So you see there's, it is hard to read, but there are 100-year storms that can happen in 5 minutes or in 10 days. And each one has its own amount of rain that would happen in that amount of time to make a 100-year storm or a 10-year storm. 5 minutes, 6.6 inches is a 100-year storm, or is a 10-year storm, excuse me. In 10 days, you get 8 inches, that's a 10-year storm. We mostly just talk about storms between 6 hours and 24 hours. Those are the ones that end up getting talked about the most, but they do produce this wide range to handle really quick, hard rain events versus the longer, slower ones that still have an impact. If you look at some prior storms, May 2014, that was considered a 100-year storm back then. Now it would be a 25-year storm. So they really did adjust this quite a bit to make it less likely that you have consecutive years with these 100-year storms or even 10-year storms. July 17 is the one I think most people remember. That was the biggest storm in Lake Bluff forever. That was a 140-year storm back then. Now it's only a 55. So to give you some idea of the magnitude of what just happened 2 days ago, that is, under their new regs, actually a 100-year storm. So we went from a 55-year storm, which we thought was almost Armageddon in some areas of the village. And this was a shorter duration, but a very, very heavy rainfall. And I don't know who all slept through it and who didn't. Where I live, we almost got no rain. So I was shocked when I got a call from Drew Saturday morning saying that, the viaduct had 10 feet of water in it. That just didn't make any sense to me, but as we see what happened, obviously, that's what
So it was
ended
the
up
volume as well as the speed at which it came down.
with. It just overwhelmed our system. I think there was 5 inches in 3 hours.
6 hours, yeah.
So, so this is not a good trend of our major storms. Keep going to the right here. So hopefully we can go a long time without this happening again, but current patterns don't look so good. This is the map we made in 2020. We did a study of the whole area you see here and what we think will flood in a 10-year storm and a 100-year storm. So after the 2017 storm, we kind of teed up this study, and the study kind of predicted in a storm like this, what would happen. So that was Pine Court. We said that would happen. That's Pine Court. This is the bike path at West Center and Maumondale, connecting that way. So that was all underwater, and the viaduct had about 10 or so feet of water in it. It drained in just under 24 hours. So as you guys are well aware, we have a plan to put a large pipe from the viaduct to Lake Michigan. Our consultants looked at, if that were in place right now, instead of 10 foot of flooding, there would have been 3 feet of flooding, and it would have taken 3 hours to drain. So this storm would not have been designed to keep the viaduct open fully during this storm. It was just beyond what we would even design for.
So when you say if that were in place, you don't just mean the viaduct, but also all the way down North Avenue? Or is just putting the big pipe under the viaduct enough to have reduced it that much?
You'd have to do it all the way to Lake Michigan, down east north, to reduce it.
Jeff, can I just ask, do you know how long, because Deer Path just redid their viaduct there at 41 and Deer Path, or Lake Forest did? And I know there was flooding there in the morning. Do we know how quickly that receded?
I don't think, I don't think they fully have that started up
Yeah,
yet. They're new pumps.
that improvement is not connected yet. It's not complete
okay,
yet. So
okay.
they suffered the normal fate.
Okay.
And then some areas that we do have some erosion, Lily and Dell, we had nice improvements done last year. It took a hit. It's not destroyed. It will take some maintenance and some work and moving some rocks around. It largely did, I think, what we expected it to do in a storm like this. So that was, I mean, it's just, Murphy's Law. You build that and the 100-year storm will come and test it. I haven't been able to look at all the ravines in Lake Bluff, but that is generally the concern I have in a storm like this is a ravine erosion. You can see fresh soil exposed. That probably happened over the weekend. So that is always a concern that will lead to even further erosion there. There's a culvert at Birch Road that has a problem. We have a budget to fix that. If you walk around Lake Bluff like I did today and drive, you'll see people with rolled up carpet, tied and carpet pad out for garbage. So obviously there was property damage. We have a few houses that flooded that we kind of know that happens in a storm like this. The other thing that we look at is there's sewer backups. That was nice that Tom Swarthout had mentioned that they pumped 7 million gallons of sewage instead of a 500,000 gallon on Saturday. So that's 14 times a daily load. But during the storm, it's probably closer to 50 times what normally would be in those pipes. So you all have approved money in the past for improving our sanitary system. We have a manhole project starting in 2 weeks that's going to help tighten up our system. Many communities do have a point-of-sale inspection to try to get cross connects out when their sump pump goes to sanitary or downspouts or other yard drains. We do not do that. So we know that these spikes happen during these storms in the sanitary sewer.
What you talk about with that I&I, talk about what that's called.
Yes. Inflow and infiltration into our sanitary system. A lot of our project we're doing is actually, we have the wrong lids on a bunch of manholes. They have an open hole, so I can put the pick in and pull the lid up, but a sanitary sewer should have a closed pick hole, so it doesn't just let water pour in. You'd be amazed how much water will go in through those holes. So we have had reports of sewer backups. Sometimes that's our system. Sometimes it's the laterals partially clogged and they're trying to run their sump pump through it and it just doesn't make it, or the foundation drains get overwhelmed. I generally look for those carpets rolled up, in bunches on the same street to say that maybe we had a problem. We know our sewer surcharge on Ravine Avenue because our guys were out there looking at it. There's not much they can do at that point. It's flowing as hard as it can. There's just more water coming to it than the sewer can put out. So fortunately though, also Jake and the Public Works guys all spring and summer have been working on cleaning sewers like they have been. There's a larger commitment this year than in the past. So most of the east side has been cleaned already this year, and we had a televisor clean a lot of the west terrace. So I think we have avoided some other backups that could have happened had that work not been done. So I'm happy that Public Works was able to put such a commitment to getting the sewer truck out and cleaning all the sewers that they could. The other thing that really helped is the power didn't go out, so people's sump pumps kept working. That would have been a very, very bad situation if we lost
Was
power.
there some sort of an improvement in the electric, do you know, over the past 5
ComEd
years?
has been trying to improve their reliability for several years. You see a lot of the changes on East Prospect and Maple. And I think those, Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, those are more, if the power blips out, they can reroute it from new directions to get it back on quickly. Those cables are also stronger. I don't think, we didn't have a whole lot of trees down, which is
The wind
normally
was not as
the
powerful,
ComEd
yeah.
issue. But they have invested in Lake Bluff pretty heavily in the past 5 years to try to increase their reliability. So that is kind of the short version of, yeah, I think that is Lawrence.
Viaduct rescue dog.
Yeah,
I didn't see
from
that.
our dog program from the 125s. So if you have any questions? I'm happy
He was
to answer
busy.
them.
He was busy. Yeah.
Well, we've seen you in the last couple meetings with, capital reports and
well, stormwater.
updates, and it's nice to see you in person, and I do like to hear about all the things that happen. I'm sorry this was one that required so much work and future work, but we appreciate the updates. And if there are any questions from anyone for
I was
Jeff?
just wondering if we think it would be worthwhile to maybe in the next Lake Bluff letter, send something out asking people if they had flooding, because there may, like, things are always changing in the village, and maybe there's an area that, or a home or something where there's been flooding that we haven't seen before, and we can add it to the map, or we can at least, kind of keep track of it going forward. I don't know if that, Drew, do you think that would be?
We can do
like,
that, sure. Yeah.
I don't know if it would be effective.
Well, we did that big survey.
We did, yeah.
And got a lot of people to respond, but there's nothing that makes people respond
Good storm event.
Right.
like having a really
Exactly.
bad situation. And just to be reminded that there is a method by which you can kind of share that information, and it hopefully will inform how we move forward.
I've been on the phone a lot today, and I expect more calls to come
Yeah.
in
Okay.
through the week. And more things, and usually our sanitary sewer backups are wipes that people flush or grease, and so we should probably tell people to stop doing that as well. Because then when this happens, that can catch, and a lot of times by the time we get there, that has pushed through just by pressure. But when it blips for a little bit, people get it rising. As soon as it comes through your floor drain, you have a problem, even if
Right.
it's only for 5 minutes.
Right.
I think that's a good point in terms of educating people, that this is really like a massive septic system in a way, and what goes in matters. I think that's maybe a comfort level with just flushing certain things, that because it's just going into the ether, when it can have a really detrimental effect. But I was just gonna say that I think it's profound to see the frequency with that. This will not for much longer just be 5-year separations. It'll become annual. And I think that's I take that from a farmer that I talked to who said the storms that he's out in the Rockford area, he said they're not more frequent, they're more water. And for farmers, it's devastating as well for different reasons. And I think, the question is, in the interim period between now and, like, Trustee Ryder asked a question about, the pipe and the viaduct. Jeff, as you've said to us numerous times, it all starts east and works westward. So I just think between now and the time that project gets started, I don't know if we have even a remote idea of what we could give residents as to some kind of timeline for when we may begin, because I think people want to see some light at the end of this tunnel and some hope about this problem being mitigated soon.
And to answer, or not even answer, but just say the best information, and I can add that Jeff didn't say, is that on Saturday morning, I was in communication with Darren Olson, who's our consultant from Christopher Burke Engineering, doing our stormwater, doing the phase 1 that we're doing, working hand in hand with Lake County Stormwater Management Commission, who their executive director was also here in town, looking at this and understanding. And I think what was the words? He really understands the magnitude of the problem. When he was standing there, he was west of the viaduct and looking at, he was like, oh my gosh, it's in the Montessori lot, right?
Yes.
But to answer that, so the phase 1 has started, and typically, Jeff, how long does that take, or would he anticipate?
18 months.
18 months.
Realistically, if we can find some funding, it's probably 3 to 5 years before we could start at this point, just to get the engineering done and the permits. And to your earlier point, the annual rainfall totals haven't changed. It's just coming more intense, smaller amount of storms.
Drought, storm, drought,
Annual
storm.
hasn't changed.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
Annual's
just-
pretty steady, but
Yeah.
the amount of large storms has gone up quite a bit.
Right, so the frequency of the 100-year is now, as you pointed out, 2014, 2017, 2022.
You can go back to that slide.
On that.
I think it's your second slide.
And then if we look back at that original one where you see going all the way back into the 1900s, that I think is the one that really tells the story
There.
here. That's dramatic to me, is that we're seeing this increase from 1900 and 1904. And then they're just all here. So it's really, that's wild.
Yeah, I even notice on this one, if you look at southern Illinois.
And this one, too.
It's almost equal. It's almost like they haven't, it's almost like it's drier as you get further south. But up here, we've gotten much wetter.
I mean, I can recall the one time when I was young, I think it was 86 or 87, where the ravine next to our house filled.
Mhm.
And that was the one time until 2014, that, to my knowledge, that we had anything that was as catastrophic, I
Yeah, I think the
suppose.
86 storm is,
It was
exceeds
86.
everything we've had since.
Yeah, 86 was incredible. My father and I were standing in the front yard and watched a tree fall on our house. I mean, it was just, we were at the end of ravine, the west end, so that in Artesian Park, obviously was a lake, and literally the whole ravine, the water, we were standing in almost knee-deep water in my parents' front yard. It was bizarre. And that's where, for people who don't know, all of the water that comes from the 176 goes under the viaduct, goes right under my parents' front yard, right? And daylights at Evanston and Sylvan. And we're standing there, and the manhole cover just goes way up in the air, and up comes a tree. It was really, the force of the water. And that's changed, though. So some things have been done over years to either slow water down or to keep those things from happening. There are big grates on where those pipes, where they daylight, right? So that big debris can't get in there. So
You'd be surprised what's in that manhole. Our guys will spend hours in the manhole at the corner of Evanston and Ravine.
well, it
Cutting
never
wood,
came
you
off
know,
again.
From top side, the fence posts,
Yeah.
the split rail
Yes.
fence in the park has been in there. I think they stopped replacing it in the park now because we keep fishing it out of the manhole. And
Yeah.
that's a junction with a turn, so that is a
Okay.
very
Yeah.
common spot for a snag.
Yeah, that's a tricky spot. But I mean, I appreciate all the things you've done. I'm just wondering if there are any other creative ideas that we could use in the village in green space. I've advocated for this before, to slow the water down. Because like, places where where it's entering the system that are green spaces, where we could use Mother Nature to help us slow the volume that's entering the system during these kind of events. I'm thinking along Sheridan, along 176, like, places where now it's hard, but it could be green.
You see in a lot of cities, either in the center median or the side, there's lower, filtration basins.
Yeah,
Those, for small storms, they will help a little. Those are actually more for water quality. They remove a lot of pollutants. It's almost like a sand filter, the
Yeah.
stuff coming off the street, which is high in metals and other pollutants and fertilizers. When you get a storm like this, it's just, that gets overwhelmed so quickly. It doesn't provide, the kind of storage. We looked at 8 years ago, that green space, West Center and Mama, that wooded area. What if we dug that all out as deep as we could and let that fill up? And it was, not even going from the 1-year storm to the 2-year storm with the viaduct. It was $1.5 million, I think it was, for very little benefit. I mean, that's why, like Target, that pond is so big. It's hard to have little spaces add up
Right.
to that much volume, but there
Right.
is like I said, a benefit for small storms, and there is a water quality benefit, which is normally what those kind of come under.
how did that one, isn't the target one over an acre? I think is my
I think it is.
recollection.
I haven't looked at it.
I
I know
think
it was
it is.
very full today at midday.
Still.
I was over there. It was still
Yeah.
quarters full.
On Saturday, there was about a foot or two of headspace left.
Wow. Wow. But it's working. I mean,
It works.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't drain like it's supposed to. That's why I was looking at it today. So we'll
Holds,
look at it
yeah,
later this week and see if it's actually letting water out as fast as it should, because it needs to rebound and be ready for another storm.
Right, just because we had so much rain Thursday evening. I think Lake Forest had a ton of rain on Thursday, and then, so those, you're right, those back-to-back storms. Where does the Target pond drain to?
It goes to the south. There's that, what is that building that's going to be a storage place through the old, was it?
Oh, the liquid controls
And
into
then
that
it goes under
detention pond?
41 through a little bit of canals and into the Skokie.
Okay. Oh, so it goes underneath, goes east, and then enters
It
the.
goes south and east, and then south and east a little more.
Got it, okay.
Well, thank you so much for these updates. It's been very, very helpful. to hear from you directly what's going on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else in the village administrator's report?
ma'am.
Very full, very, very full. Okay, let's go back to our original agenda. We're now up to item 7, which is the village finance report. Item 7A, the warrant report for July 12th through July 25th, 2022. Expenditure of village funds for payments of invoices in the amount of $202,367.90 for the period of July 12th through July 25th, 2022. The warrant report has an invoice register which shows checks with a status of open or paid, and all checks with the status of open are computer generated for the board's final approval. Checks with the status of paid are manual checks that have been processed. And so we have Bettina here. Do you have any questions for Bettina regarding the warrant report? Any questions? I did have a question that I asked of Drew earlier regarding the payments that had been made to the mosquito,
Clark.
yes, Clark, who handles the mosquito abatement. And just wondering, there were 3 months' worth, and is that representative of what we'll see going forward? And what was included in that? Because we had a discussion at length about what type of, treatments would be included. And so I was hoping you could expound on that.
Sure, happy to do so. So that payment, there's 3 payments within that, and that's about a fifth of what we're spending overall. When the board approved the contract, it was, I'll call base services, which is education, surveillance, and larvicide treatments. And that's all they've been doing so far. So, I mean, the good news is the weather's really cooperated. And we haven't had significant concerns or complaints. I think there was a total of 5 calls from the beginning of the season, and most of that was to report standing water, which we do encourage residents, if they see standing water, to report it to the village so that they can get out there and assess it and treat it. Clark was out on Sunday and observing what was going on with standing water after the storm, and I think they too were surprised by how much had been absorbed already. Usually, after the storms previously, they've noted that it usually sits longer, so that was good news also. I think they're predicting around August 3rd to 5th when they'll see the hatching from this storm, so we'll see how bad that is. But they did say because they had done a treatment of larvicide, and they do those in their storm inlets. They did that not too long ago, given that the presumption is a pretty safe one that they're gone from the vent, that they'll be back and do it again. And so that'll be helpful to manage and keep the populations down. So I think all in, they've probably treated just around 10 acres of land in total, which is a lot in the village. For site inspections and treatments, again, just to remind folks that if you do see standing water, or if you have comments or concerns, to go through the Clark portal.com hotline and make comments about that, and they'll follow up.
Thank you. And I neglected to ask for a motion, so at this point in time, we don't have to vote, but do we have a motion to consider?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Trustee Markey, and seconded by Trustee Rappin. Any other further comments or questions regarding the warrant report?
Drew, what's for clean cut, were those the elm trees, or where was that? It's a $9,700.
Clean cut, there were, I want to say, it was either 8, there was fewer than 10 trees that we identified as hazardous to go through and take down. One of them, they actually had to come in and do that tore out on Simpson, but it was a handful of trees that we deemed hazardous that we used to get done, talking about availability contractors, we used to get done like in a week or two that we did, but it took months actually to get them to show up and do that. But there was hazardous, I don't remember, and unfortunately Jake's out of town and not on the call, but there was about 10 hazardous trees.
Multiple trees.
Yes. We did I know he bid it. It was a bidding process, and they came in at the lowest responsible bid.
Thank you. If there are no more questions or comments, roll call, please.
Member Briand, I'm sorry, Trustee Briand.
Aye.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Sorry. Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
And Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Thank you.
It happens.
Next is the June 2022 financial report. Bettina, would you like to make your comments?
Sure.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. Some of the noteworthy comments or items found in the monthly report include the monthly sales tax revenue on a cash basis for June, which was $297,622, which was $43,522 or 12.8% less than the fiscal year 22 cash basis receipts. However, of note, it's still 3.8% greater than the pre-COVID receipts of June of 2020. Building permit revenue for fiscal year 23 to date is $84,045, which is $660 less than the same reporting period last fiscal year. General fund FY23 total revenues of $3,019,819, or $136,601 greater than the fiscal 22 year-to-date revenues, and this is primarily due to accounting accrual entries related to vehicle licenses and business licenses that were booked later in fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 23 current expenditures are consistent with or less than budgeted for the total general fund. Fiscal year-to-date expenditures of $1,359,938, or $119,395 less than the expenditures for the same period in FY22.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the trustees?
Go ahead, Drew. I just had a really quick question, and Drew and I talked about it a little bit earlier, the American Rescue Plan Act information. Are we just about done with those payments? Like, are we almost done with it looked like the distribution of those payments coming in was over 12 months. Are we?
We haven't received the second tranche yet.
We have not?
No, it should
Okay.
be in September.
Okay, and those
About
are
12 months from the first one.
Okay, thank you. And those are going towards, we've put those towards capital improvements, correct?
No, they're sitting in a separate account, the IMED account, until we determine what we're spending them on.
Okay.
They're isolated.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Trustee Rappin, did you? or-
I don't have any questions.
Trustee
My
Ryder?
question was the same.
Yeah.
I continue to wonder, what are we looking for to expend that money on? Like, if it's a rainy day fund, I think we had one of those. So do we have anything in the works that we're planning to use that for?
My recollection in the capital plan, we talked about using that for water improvements. That's what we had talked about, and given that there's always more than enough water infrastructure to invest and reinvest in, that's what's been discussed to date.
Okay.
There were some specific parameters, right, that you had to use that?
Correct, and water is
Yes,
one of
one
them.
of
Stormwater is another. And I think the water conversation also came up at the time of talking about the lead service replacements and other things that.
Definitely.
Bettina, a question for you in the pie chart. Food is 7%. I assume that's groceries. Is that right?
The Illinois Department of Revenue pie chart that was.
Yeah, I'm just
in there.
curious if food is defined as if that's tax revenue from the sale of groceries, like at Heinen's
Yes.
and Target. It is, okay, and the sales tax has been suspended as of July 1st, correct?
So the state suspended it, but
This-
that does not mean that they're not distributing to us.
Okay, so, but what is the impact of that?
From what I understand, there should be no net impact on the
No.
municipalities themselves, because they're still tracking their receipts through the ST1 reporting from each individual business, and then those funds are still being distributed to the states, just not, the state's
Right, so
paying
it
us
costs
instead
the
of.
state, it
Right.
does not cost the municipality.
Exactly.
That's good. The one thing I noticed is for the first time since I've been sitting here, the automotive is down under 60%. And if you extrapolate out the number, it looks like it's going to come in significantly lower than it has historically. Do you know have you got any line on what's going on there? In terms of, I realize it's a pie chart, but just, it looks like the numbers are decreasing. Do we hear anything in the?
Is this about availability?
Yeah, it's supply. That's what my answer was going to be initially.
Yeah.
It's supply. And of course, interest rates aren't helping that either right now. So you have a kind of a perfect storm for a decrease.
Right, exactly. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, hearing no other questions, roll call, please. Or this is just
Voice vote.
this is just a financial report, so a voice vote All in favor of receiving the report?
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you. Okay. Next is the village attorney's report.
No report tonight.
Thank you. Village president's report. Regis did not send a report, and I have no report. Acceptance of the correspondence. So please note that correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees in the form of informational reports on July 8th and July 15th. Do I have a motion to accept the correspondence?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, trustee Bregan and trustee Fisher. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We are up to agenda item 15, which is a resolution amending the village's fee waiver policy.
12 and 13.
Yes, I wrote notes on 12 and 13. The petitioners for items 12 and 13, which is regarding the second reading of an ordinance granting variations from the village's side yard setback and daylight plane height restrictions for 500 and 502 East North Avenue, and then the related ordinance designating 500 East North Avenue as an historic landmark. Those, per the petitioner's request, they would like to have a continuance. Their architect is unavailable to attend the meeting tonight, and so they request that at the next regularly scheduled village board meeting, we continue and bring this second reading up again.
Do they need to run together? Is there a reason we couldn't vote on the historic landmark?
I think it was the petitioner's request, so we will,
Got it.
there's no reason not to.
Sure.
So do I have a motion to have a continuance for these items 12 and 13 until our next regularly scheduled board meeting?
So
So-
moved.
Second.
Thank you, trustee Fisher and trustee Markey. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I felt strongly.
We respect you. Okay, on to item 15, once again, which is a resolution amending the village's fee waiver policy. On November 2021, upon recommendation from the Finance Committee, the Village Board adopted a fee waiver policy with Resolution 2021-61, allowing the village administrator and/or the Village Board to grant a fee waiver or reduction in development-related fees for nonprofit agencies. At its April 25th, 2022 meeting, the Village Board granted a waiver of fees for a solicitor's permit for the Village Lake Bluff Garden Club and directed staff to prepare a possible update on how other licenses and fees are processed or waived. The village recently received a request for a solicitor's permit application from the Lake Forest Knights of Columbus, Council Number 1268, to conduct their annual Tootsie Roll Drive in mid-September. Based on the village's board direction, the attached resolution would modify the village's existing fee waiver policy to do the following. A, allow nonprofits without, quote, offices or operations, end quote, in the village to be eligible for a fee waiver if volunteers reside within the village. The village would still have the sole and absolute discretion to deny a fee waiver. And B, allow the waiver of fees for raffle licenses of $25, Class L liquor licenses, $30 for nonprofit picnics, outdoor festivals, etc., and peddler/solicitor licenses, which are $100 per person. Given the pending Knights of Columbus request and the Finance Committee's dedication to the study of a stormwater utility, staff is bringing this item directly to the village board for consideration. And attached is the resolution with the policy changes outlined, redlined, and an excerpt from the minutes of the April 25th village board meeting. Do I have a motion? Or did I already do that? Do I have a
No, you did
motion?
So moved.
So moved by trustee Markey. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by trustee Ryder. Any comments, questions, or discussion?
Drew, could you just clarify that in section B, that peddler solicitor license, how it pertains to nonprofits?
So when nonprofits are out soliciting for donations, that's would qualify. So that's how that's come up in the past, and that was the most recent application actually that this board considered and weighed, had to do with the garden club who came forward looking to occupy a table on village property and solicit donations. And so the idea that technically was a solicitation under the village's code, so that's how that got wrapped into all this. Hopefully that answers the
Yeah,
question.
that does, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments regarding this amendment to the village's fee waiver policy? Hearing none, this is a roll call vote.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Trustee Marquis.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Inkerman.
Aye.
And Trustee Briand.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay, next is the trustees' report. Do any trustees have a report that they would like to share? Hearing none. Number 17 is consideration of the July 11th, 2022 executive session meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Ryder. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Briand. Are there any comments, questions, corrections? Hearing none, I believe this is just a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any items for executive session? Hearing that we have none this evening, I guess we can entertain a motion for adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Fisher. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Marquis. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Nice job, Barbara.
Thank you.
As always.
Right.
And thank you, everybody, for staying so late. I'm so sorry.